We're continuing to celebrate Black History Month by looking back at the year that brought big moments into the culture, like protests against police brutality in the NFL, the release of Rihanna's last studio album, and the end of the Obama administration, just to name a few. That year was 2016. Carla Hayden was also appointed as the Librarian of Congress by President Obama that year, and she served in that role until she was fired by President Trump in 2025. She is here with us in studio now as we look back on some of the biggest moments for Black literature. Welcome to All Things Considered. It's so great to have you in our studios.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
As we get into our conversation, I just want to remind people about you. You were the first woman, first Black American to lead the Library of Congress, which is, of course, one of the largest libraries in the world. Back when you were appointed to the job in 2016, you spoke to my NPR colleague, Michelle Martin, and when you talked with her, you described the library in that moment as a sanctuary, an opportunity center for so many people. That was a decade ago. What do you see the role of the library as in our society today?
It's a trusted source and a trusted resource for people when they're looking in the age of misinformation and they're wondering, well, they can see the real thing. They could see Abraham Lincoln's draft of the Gettysburg Address in his own hand. They can see the real thing and they can do research there. So it's even more important at this time for not only the Library of Congress, but libraries in general, to be that trusted source.
I want to shift gears a bit and start to talk about all of these books. And I will just note here in our studios, you have brought some incredible books with you that have all kind of transported us back to 2016. And if I can, I want to start with a book that I know both of us love, and that is Another Brooklyn by Jacqueline Woodson. Tell us what made you bring that book along.
It marked another landmark in Jacqueline Woodson's career. She is a best-selling author of award-winning books, especially for young people, young adults. And this was her first foray into writing for adults as well. She starts from her own truths, and she is able to use her poetic voice because she writes poetry as well. And she combines that with a truth-telling, and people can relate to it. It's not as opaque as some writing is. It's very direct, but lyrical. And I think that's what grabs people. And you said that this was one of your favorite books.
I love this book. So I have not read it since 2016 when it first came out. And that was a year I was a campaign reporter. I wasn't doing a ton of reading for pleasure, but I was so struck by just the clarity and the sharpness and the beauty of her writing that I think I might have to go back and pick it back up after this conversation and read it one more time.
And she's a food lover. So I just have page 90. I'll just do that. Sister Loretta made us navy beans and eggplant parmesan. She said, no more collard greens or lima beans. And my brother and I said, I can dig that because we were learning to speak jive talk. And you could just get so immersed in it. She makes the flavors come alive and making you think about it. And she's just a wonderful writer.
She is. Now, another book that we were talking about before we hopped on these microphones was The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. And for people who haven't read it, this is a book that envisions the Underground Railroad that we know as like a literal underground train system. Talk about this book and what made it such a standout.
Well, he takes you into an imaginary world where you are so engrossed into it. I remember he was at my first, as librarian, the National Book Festival.
And that was in 2016, right?
2016. And there were people who really thought that there was an actual underground railroad.
Like railroad with the rail tracks, the trains, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and all of that. And that just shows you how vividly he creates scenes. And this really broke through for so many people. And it also led to people wanting to do research on the real Underground Railroad. And that's what librarians love, that you can take something and then people want to know more about it.
Now, Colson Whitehead spoke to NPR when this book came out, and he talked about how he made the leap of making this train literal and how he approached bringing in different parts of American history into his writing. I want to listen to what he had to say.
There's echoes of the Holocaust when she comes to North Carolina and there's a white supremacist state. So that, initial whimsical choice to play with the metaphor allowed me to mix and match and explore different areas of American history.
First of all, I just love hearing his voice again talking about this book. Carla Hayden, what does that bring to mind for you about the way that he wrote and constructed this book?
He brings in different historical facts, scenes, and he connects them. And that is a wonderful aspect of his writing, that he is able to combine what the basic story he's trying to tell with all other related stories and make connections that the reader might not have made.
Do you in any way feel like these works that we've been talking about, that they're in conversation with one another?
The thread is looking at historical facts, but also making things relatable to people of today. And James McBride, that's one.
Yes.
I don't
we haven't
think
talked
we've
about that
talked
one
about
yet.
that.
Let's get into it.
In terms of history, of course, he was known for The Color of Water, when he talked about his own life, and The Good Lord Bird. But the one that he brought out in 2016 was about James Brown and the American soul, Kill 'Em and Leave. And he was able to not only tell James Brown's story, but the story of the South, South Carolina, all types of things. Michael Jackson actually going to the funeral home and sitting with the body of James Brown because that was one of his idols. And so bringing in and weaving so many things together was, I think, a through line of all of the books that we've been talking about.
When you think back about these authors, are there ways that you feel their influence or their imprint now in the present day, 10 years later as we sit in 2026?
One thing that comes through is that their works have endured. People are going back to them, and they produced other work. So there's a body of work for all of these authors and illustrators that will, I hope, give people a reservoir of material that they can dive into at a time that might feel somewhat challenging. Mm-hmm. We like to think that being able to be transported or get information that's contained in books could be helpful.
We've been speaking with Carla Hayden. She served as Librarian of Congress until 2025, and she's now a senior fellow at the Mellon Foundation. Thank you so much for dropping by our studios.
Oh, thank you.
That's a novel idea. The information in books is supposed to be helpful. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, February 20, 2026, Negro History Month. So I have been told. New book, our debut study session, the late Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles' dissertation, PanAfrican Sites of Resistance, Black Bookstores, and the Struggle to Represent Black Identity. This dissertation was published in 1995. That would be the year of the O.J. Simpson trial. That would be the year of Timothy McVeigh. That would be the year of the Million Man March, among other important things from that year. But at any rate, this is a historic moment here at the C.O.W.S, Katherine Massey Book Club specifically. This is our first time reading a non-book for the book club. Now, we had this chance a few times before. We were going to read a manifesto here or there, but first time, a non-book. So this is not going to be no love story and romance and does he get the girl and this is a serious study of black bookstores and racism. Following our reading of Char Adams Black-Owned, The Revolutionary Life of the Black Bookstore, I want you to keep in mind, Char Adams gives a shout-out to Dr. Beckles at the end of the book. She does not cite or reference any of his work in that text, unless I'm mistaken. I will go back and double-check, but I don't think she goes through and mentions and talks about blah, blah, blah. unless I'm mistaken. I'll go back and double check. If I made an error, I'm more than willing to come back. I was wrong. But in the interim, I don't think she mentions Dr. Beckles' work. Now, once we get through with all this, we can process and see what we think about all that. At any rate, we did hear Carla Hayden at the beginning. She gave some of her recommendations for what books she thinks we should read, what books would be great, and all that. Carla Hayden was fired by President Donald Trump. She was the first black female librarian of Congress. He fired her in May of 2025 for recommending books like what you just heard, all that wokeness and DEI. You know, do all that literary under the Trump administration. I'm not going to comment about the books that Miss Hayden gave. She gave her job for, talk about racism. So VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualified. I will say that one of the books that she recommended, old James McBride, now she mentioned his later book from 2016 about James Brown. I do know about The Good Lord Bird. That book specifically, I remember myself and even Gloria Richardson, who was a member of SNCC, who I think got mentioned in connection with these bookstores as well. But Gloria Richardson even said about The Good Lord Bird, like, wait a minute, isn't that the book where they have a black slave named Henry Shackelford in a dress? Yup, that's the book. Anyway, that's what I think anytime I hear James McBride, even though that is a black male, unless I am mistaken. With Colin Beckles, before we get to his dissertation, I just want to include, I'm just going to read the report and then we'll get to it. This is from the Seattle Times, April 11, 1999. Dr. Colin Beckles, Washington State University professor, dead at 34 in an apparent suicide. Dr. Colin Beckles, a Washington State University professor and social justice activist, has died in an apparent suicide. He was 34. Dr. Beckles was found dead in his home Wednesday. No further information on the death was released. An assistant professor in WSU's Department of Comparative American Cultures, Mr. Beckles focused much of his teaching and research on the social situation of Black Americans. He joined student leaders in calling on WSU administrators to push for a more diversified campus. Mr. Beckles also campaigned against Initiative 200, the state ballot measure voters adopted last fall that essentially ended affirmative action in school admissions and government contracting and hiring. Anything that had to do with social justice, he was right there, said Jai Elliott, Director for Recruitment and Retention at WSU's College of Business. Mr. Beckles came to WSU from California in 1995. He had served as co-chair of the African American Faculty Staff Association. He recently moved from Pullman to Spokane, where he was editor of the city's African American Voice newspaper. His wife, Maria Cueva Beckles, is a WSU graduate student in sociology who lives in Pullman. A memorial service was scheduled for tomorrow at St. James Episcopal Church in Pullman. Again, this is from 1999. His dissertation was published just 4 years before his death. I find it important. They say that he was dedicated to social justice and black people. They don't say that he was focused on racism. The word racism doesn't pop up in here at all. They give all that social justice, whatever that means. They don't say. Mr. Beckles was focused on racism and how it impacted black people. Never want to say the word racism, which might have contributed to his suicide. Incidentally, this is in Washington State. I'm so glad that we're reading this. I've done all that time bragging about Washington State, Mary Kay, and all that. Dr. Beckles, right here doing his research in Washington State, even though his dissertation was published at UCLA in California. But that said, we will go ahead and get to it. I thought that was really important for context to include that right at the very beginning, the gravity to this research, him passing away at 34. The late and great research of Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles. Again, his dissertation, PanAfrican Sites of Resistance, Black Bookstores, and the Struggle to Represent Black Identity. Katherine Massey Book Club, audio segment 1.
Pan-African Sites of Resistance, Black Bookstores, and the Struggle to Represent Black Identity. A dissertation submitted in partial satisfaction of the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy in Sociology by Colin Anthony Beckles, 1995, for the University of California, Los Angeles. Acknowledgements. I would like to thank my dissertation thesis advisor and chair of my doctoral committee, Dr. Walter Allen, for sharing the wisdom and strength. Special thanks also go to my doctoral committee for their guidance and assistance. I would also like to thank the following organizations for their support: the numerous Black Bookstore staff and patrons for entrusting me with their history. At UCLA, the Graduate Affirmative Affairs Department, the Data Archives Division of the Institute for Social Science Research, the administrative staff of the Sociology Department, the Center for African American Studies and the Marcus Garvey Papers, the Institute for Caribbean Studies at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica, the Black Cultural Archives, Brixton, England, and the Center for the Study of Ethnic Relations, University of Warwick, England. Special thanks to Maria Cuevas for her unyielding support and advice, which greatly facilitated the completion of this project. Abstract of the dissertation: Pan-African Sites of Resistance, Black Bookstores, and the Struggle to Represent Black Identity, by Colin Anthony Beckles, Doctor of Philosophy in Sociology, University of California, Los Angeles, 1995. Professor Walter Allen, Chair. Objectives. This project investigated how Black bookstores functioned historically as Pan-African sites of resistance, institutions engaged in a battle with white mainstream institutions over the meaning of Black identity. Qualitative analysis was performed at Black bookstores in England, the U.S., and Jamaica in order to analyze the bookstore members' perspective. Oral history interviews, archival data, and ethnographic data were collected at the local, national, and international levels. Sites and subjects were obtained via snowball sampling, and the data was cross-validated against sites, subjects, and the published literature. These findings appeared across sites. 1. Store members were political activists who conceptualized the shop as a political space in which the objective was to liberate the minds of Black people by deconstructing racist notions of Black identity and reproducing the truth about Black African identity. 2. As Pan-African sites of resistance for the local and international Black community, Black bookstores shared the following characteristics: serving as a critical meeting, organization, and recruiting center for Black activists, as a gathering place which linked writers, activists, intellectuals, and the everyday Black community, serving as informal debate and alternative education centers. 3. They served as a critical node in the international network of resistance. 4. Black bookstores experienced repression by U.S., FBI agents, the British police, and racist organizations. 5. Black bookstores used a variety of strategies to withstand this repression. Section 1. Introduction. The story. Throughout various parts of the African diaspora, Black activists have been engaged in a struggle over the meaning of Black identity. Historically, the main combatants have been those who produced traditional, mainstream white or European discourse versus Black activists who produce Black counter-hegemonic discourse. Black activists argue that white mainstream discourse has been dominant in the battle. Produced via the white mainstream's control of major social institutions, the enemy attempts to subordinate blackness by positioning or hiding Black identity within, beneath, or behind white identity. Witness the textbooks, lectures, and publications which are predominant in and are generated from white mainstream educational institutions. Witness the stereotypical images of Black identity telecommunicated around the world via Hollywood, CNN, and the BBC. Witness the discourses of colonialism and voyeurism globally disseminated by the white tourist industries. In direct opposition to this assault on the meaning of Black identity, Black activists across the globe have resisted these white discursive practices by developing and controlling their own institutional sites of resistance, such as PanAfrican bookstores. Armed with Black counter-hegemonic discourse and a multi-dimensional arsenal, Black bookstores have attempted to empower their Black community by challenging the lies with alternative representations of Black identity. With Black bookstores in the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Caribbean, the connections between Pan-African sites of resistance form a virtual web of Pan-African resistance, spun across the African diaspora. Moreover, given the multi-dimensional political impact on the Black community, these sites became faced with the historic reality that there were those who would architect strategies for their demise. As such, Black bookstore members draw on the experience of past bookstore warriors in order to defend their Black sites of resistance. The research project objectives. Now that the broad lines of battle have been drawn, the general objectives of this project was to investigate the historical role these Black bookstores played in the struggle to represent Black identity and to see how that role has changed over time. Thus, within broad historical time blocks, the following levels of inquiry took place. At the external level, the following general questions were investigated. Do the staff members of the bookstore conceptualize themselves and their bookstores as involved in a battle over the definition of Black identity? How do Pan-African bookstores serve as sites of resistance for representing Black identity? How do bookstore members believe that white discourse on Black identity is produced and disseminated? How has repression against the bookstores been demonstrated? What resistance strategies have been employed by bookstore members? At the daily interaction level, the following questions were investigated. How does the political struggle to represent Black identity function as the main organizing theme in terms of the daily bookstore activity? How do the daily social interactions occurring within the store contribute to the shop's struggle? In what way do day-to-day business goals relate to the general political goals of the store? At the internal level of analysis, questions were asked about many power struggles occurring daily between store members and the effect these struggles have on the store's presentation of Black identity. How do intra-shop differences, class, gender, culture, etc., relate to the store's presentation of Black identity? Are alternative sites of resistance produced based on the different presentations of Black identity? At the national and international levels, the following questions were asked. Are the Pan-African bookstores aware of each other's struggle? If so, what are the inter-store links? By what process is information exchanged between the stores? How do the bookshops' inter-shop relations affect each other's presentation of Black identity? Relatedly, how do local and international variations between the stores affect the resistance process occurring at each specific bookstore? How do international travelers who patronize these stores affect the bookstores and vice versa? Finally, at the temporal level, the following issues were analyzed in order to enhance the historical specificity. What is the history of the bookstore in terms of its material and philosophical organization, founders, funding, ownership, staff, clientele, merchandise? How have these changed over time and why? How are the bookstores related to historic and present-day Black social movements? Pan-Africanism, Garvey movement, negritude, civil rights, Black power, Black studies. How have the bookstore's role in the struggle and members' perception of the struggle changed historically? How have historic national differences resulted in the present variations found at each bookstore? Finally, what mistakes have been made? What has been learned from the past, and what future direction do the bookstore members and their community see for the bookstore? Before I present the methodological details, I present the intellectual path which guided me to these objectives. This will be accomplished by relating this present study to relevant theoretical and empirical sociological works. After reviewing these works, I demonstrate how my approach fills the gaps present in the existing literature. Before I present 3 interrelated reviews of the literature, first, I review theoretical approaches dealing with the social construction of racial identity. Following this, I briefly review the history of Black political institutions with special attention to the legacy of Black publishers and their relation to Black bookstores. I conclude with a review of the empirical work on political bookstores. Section 2 pertains to the research methodology and is subsequently presented. Chapter 1: Theoretical Underpinnings: The Social Construction of Race. At the broadest level, this research falls under the school of thought known as the social construction of reality. Theoretical work in this area centers on how knowledge and meaning in the world are created. Relatedly, empirical work within the field ranges from the role of science in creating racial beings to the role that police systems play in creating the criminal. Despite its plethora of different names, the social constructivist approach can be designated by the following core assumptions. A. Objects of the world are social accomplishments. B. When perceiver and object come together, what is perceived is a function of the interaction between culturally provided categories that the perceiver brings to the interaction and new information about the object that occurs in the interaction. However, while sharing certain assumptions, theoretical divisions are also found within the field. For example, the question of whether or not differential access to power structurally determines what becomes known as objective reality, the truth, or a fact, is an issue which divides the field. To demonstrate the effect of this division and how this division concerns my project, I review works from the symbolic, interactionism, and critical theory subschools. Moreover, I present works from the cultural studies approach as an attempt to fill the gaps present in the above sub-schools. We begin with a brief overview of the symbolic interactionist perspective. the microstructure, symbolic interactionism. Ever since Herbert Mead's groundbreaking work, Mind, Self, and Society, published in 1934, the symbolic interactionist perspective has attempted to understand the process by which objects are given meaning at the microstructural, interpersonal level of social interaction. Emphasizing symbols, much of the empirical works focus on language as a symbolic system and on conversation during social interaction. For symbolic interactionists, meanings are handled in and modified through an interpretive process used by the person in dealing with the things he encounters. Lindsay and Aronson term this process defining the situation. Bloomer elaborates, the nature of an object, any and every object, consists of the meaning that it has for the person for whom it is an object. This meaning sets the way in which he is prepared to act toward it and in which he is ready to talk about it. Furthermore, because of this fundamentally social nature of relationships, identities are given to objects via social interaction. Hence, the symbolic meanings of objects evolve and emerge via the interaction process, enabling the participants to define the situation subjectively. Thus stated, the primary critique against the work done by symbolic interactionists is that the meaning of social identity, such as race, is able to freely shift and change, floating from one new interaction to the next. The ability of power and social structure to fix and stabilize the meaning of entities' racial identity is not acknowledged. However, theoretical and empirical work within the sociology of race and ethnicity suggests that race maintains a definite global meaning vis-a-vis white power structures. How do power and social structure fix the meaning of identity upon an object at the macro level of social interaction? This question remains unanswered in symbolic interactionist works and remains as a conspicuous gap. However, recognizing this gap, researchers from the critical theory perspective have attempted to theorize identity in terms of its relationship to power. The macro structural level, critical theory. Predominant throughout the work of critical theory is the emphasis on the role of power in creating the meaning of identity. These theorists attempt to understand how traditional institutions are linked to the production of social identity. However, only recently has this group of social constructivists concentrated on the relationship of racial identity and power. Commonly found is the assumption that specific realities are constructed or constituted through power dynamics. As with the symbolic interactionists, language or discourse is targeted at the primary medium by which symbolic meanings are produced, highlighting the role of power in social structures. However, these authors focus on the discursive productions generated by institutional houses of power, historically white, cultural, economic, and educational institutions. For example, utilizing the canons of social science literature as their database, Mudimbe and Said reviewed Western social science discourses on Africans and Orientals. They searched for the process by which the original negative racist meanings associated with African or Oriental racial identities were generated. Their research suggests that much of the white Western social science discourse produce the negative meanings associated with Black and Oriental identity. Moreover, these discourses are based upon discursive frameworks, formations. These racist discursive frameworks buttress the everyday discourses which define the meaning of racial identities. For example, Said suggests that relying upon institutions, traditions, conventions, agreed upon codes of understanding for their effects. These discursive formations form the basis of racial meanings in Orientalist discourse. Similarly, Mudimbe states that it is the orders of knowledge which provide the conditions of possibility by which contemporary and historical social scientists or Africanists discourses derive their categories and conceptual systems of racial reality. Unfortunately, while incorporating power into their approach, I believe that what the critical theory school depicts is a situation in which these historically white institutions are in a position of total domination. Below, I will demonstrate how the presence of the following assumptions produce social actors who are essentially powerless. A. There exists an all-powerful authority which exists in the center. B. Execution of that authority's power results in total domination of the marginalized object. C. Powerless to resist, the marginalized objects incorporate the dominant institution's definitions of their identity. To begin with, both Mudimbe and Said state that it is these institutions of Western social science which do the classifying and ordering, which monopolize discourse, and which monopolize knowledge. Thus, Western social science assumes the position of a powerful discursive authority which exists in the center, setting the social meaning for truth and error. West and non-West, black and white. Secondly, the social object becomes dominated totally as a result of the Western social science all-powerful discourse. Black and non-white peoples are named, ordered, classified, and indeed totally known. This takes place via the institutional production of such things as tables and schemes of classification. Indeed, the Africans are given a new, exhaustive identity based on the Western discursive formation. Finally, as this domination is total, resistance from the marginalized group appears futile, if not improbable. Indeed, Mudimbe suggests that powerless African peoples can do nothing as the objects of the institutional gaze. Western social scientists use their discursive power to fix and stabilize the meaning of African and Black identity, ordering and positioning the racial meaning at the bottom of the evolutionary table: subordinates, primitives, savages. From a critical standpoint, I believe that such total domination approaches deny agency and power to social actors and their institution. The critical theory position suggests that actors become rigidly guided by historic structures, discursive formation, or unwittingly allow their realities to be constituted by the discourse of traditional institutional structures. This is because the notion of a power struggle is totally absent. There is only power and domination, and that power resides in the center of society, in these white institutions. Resistance to that domination by those in the margins of power remains untheorized because it is assumed that marginalized social actors are powerless to resist the discourse produced by white mainstream institutions. Finally, from the review of the symbolic interactionist perspective, we can understand the import of incorporating interaction-based processes into our discussions of identity. However, neither Mudimbe's nor Said's work extensively theorized the role that the interaction process plays. Interaction seems lost, submerged beneath the power of a one-way, deterministic, structuralist theory. Thus summarized, we see that the symbolic interactionists and critical theory perspectives have given flip sides of the social constructivist theory on identity. Non-power micro-interaction versus power-based macro structures. Lindsay and Aronson advocate a compromise, an approach which at the very least involves a dialectic between what is structurally invariant and what depends upon the actor's perceptions and interpretations. Given this, we turn to the cultural studies theorists and their power struggle approach as an initial solution. The macro-micro link, cultural studies. Combining symbolic interactionists' emphasis of the subject's role in interaction with the critical theorist's emphasis of the preeminent role of social structure, cultural studies theorists have put forth a power struggle scenario. Herein, power is held by both traditional institutional structures as well as marginalized social subjects. As such, a power struggle ensues over the definition of the meanings assigned to the subject's racial identity, with domination and resistance vacillating between opponent camps. In their major work, Racial Formation in the United States, Omni and Winant first submit that race is not a monolithic deterministic structure, but an unstable and decentered complex of social meanings. Secondly, while utilizing the notion of racial power structure, they do so in a non-deterministic fashion. Indeed, the authors suggest a reconceptualization away from the traditional view of power structure, one monolithic entity existing in the center, such that social structure may be understood as a series of sites. Third, they propose that power is decentered, available to both margin and center groups. With this decentered notion of power, the authors depict a power struggle ensuing between traditional structures and these series of sites. Consequently, racial structures and the meaning of race categories produced by these sites are constantly being formed, transformed, destroyed, and reformed via the process of political struggle. Elaborating on this process, Omni and Winant's fourth proposition suggests that discursive struggle occurs at the macro level of social structure. Social science institutions, white-controlled mass media institutions, etc., and at the micro level of social interaction. In other words, in the discourses encompassing the lived realities of social actors. The key to understanding this macro-micro link is conceptualizing a continuous and reciprocal relationship occurring between both macro and micro levels. At the micro level, race is a matter of individuality, of the formation of identity. At the macro level, race is a matter of collectivity, of the formation of social structures, economic, political, and cultural, ideological. The racial order is organized and enforced by the continuity and reciprocity between these two levels of social relations. In our lived experience, in politics, in culture, in economic life, they are continuous and reciprocal. Finally, they suggest that we also view these series of sites of resistance not in the normal macro-analytic way, but as macro structures in which micro interactions occur. Located as such, we would then be able to witness the continuity and reciprocity between the two levels occurring within these sites. Given this, these sites of resistance would be arenas in which discursive power struggles over the meaning of racial identity could be witnessed at both the micro and macro levels of social life. Given the above, the question now remains as to what sites of resistance have been historically available to the Black community. We turn now to briefly present a review of these Black political organizations. The historical. The legacy of Black sites of resistance. Being forced to live beneath the twin pillars of race and class domination, people of African descent across the globe have had to organize to protect their communities and resist these structures of domination. Most famous of these resistance organizations was the Marcus Garvey Universal Negro Improvement Organization. With centers in the United States, England, Africa, and the Caribbean, Garvey's United Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, was the most extensive Pan-African resistance institution. Dissent with one another, and was one of the earliest Pan-African organizations. Similarly, Du Bois' first four Pan-African Congresses brought intellectuals, leaders, and activists of African descent together from across Europe, the Caribbean, Africa, and the U.S., attempting organize, unify, and give the direction to the Pan-African struggle against white domination. Similarly, within the U.S., the resistance efforts of political organizations such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Black Panthers, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee are well documented. Moreover, despite the transitory nature of movement centers and halfway houses, they too served a vital role as temporary organizational bases for civil rights leaders. But what of those institutions not necessarily defined by the political nature? The Black church, press, radio stations, and publishers have also had a continuous impact, functioning as informal empowerment centers for the Black community. Defined as political entities internally by their members, as well as externally the dominant society, these institutions have also come under attack by white repressive agencies. While the more overt political struggles and activities of the above institutions and their relationship to Black communities has been well documented, the struggles of one institution has escaped extensive academic documentation and analysis. Black Pan-African bookstores. As their bookstore role would seem most to be closely associated to that of publishing, we turn now to specifically review the political legacy of Black publishers. In Joyce's pivotal work, Gatekeepers of Black Culture, he documents the historic process by which Black publishing programs in particular, and the U.S. Black literary trade in general, were developed by the Black community as a political response to the racist writings published by the white literary institutions. Indeed, the primary objectives are succinctly summarized by Du Bois' organization: to respond to the attacks made on the mental and social characteristics of the Black American by white supremacist scholarly writers. Given this, Joyce reports that 3 escalations in Black publishing productivity have occurred between 1775 and 1981. Of note is that he suggests that these escalations corresponded to the surge in racist writings produced from white institutions and corresponding civil rights activism in the Black community. For example, the original surge in Black publishing activity came during the 19th century abolitionist movement. During this time, free Blacks became politically active, organizing black press establishments and black publishing houses in response to the racism and discrimination practiced by white literary institutions. The second surge in black publishing activity came during the late part of the 19th and the early part of the 20th century, again as a response to the plethora of racist, social Darwinist-based writings, films, and policies produced by many of the nation's white intellectual, artistic, and political leaders. Moreover, in addition to independent publishing institutions, many black cultural organizations were also established. They too developed publishing programs during this time period, and their primary objectives were similar to that of independent black publishing agencies: counteract the racist representations of black identity produced by white publishing institutions. The third surge in black publishing activity came in the mid-20th century when anti-racist movements again began to swell. The civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and the Black Studies movements combined with other structural forces to generate within blacks a growing self-awareness of their present and past culture. In turn, this led to a growing demand for books that treated black history and culture objectively. Given this demand by the black community, in the late 1960s and early 70s, we again see a new proliferation of black publishing institutions and cultural organizations with publishing programs producing black books, magazines, articles, and newspapers. Moreover, the various aspects of the black community seem to be establishing their own particular publishing houses. Thus, black women's publishing houses appear in the 1970s. Other types of black publishing houses appear as well, which seem to follow the ideological division found within the black community, falling along race, class, and gender lines. Summarized as such, we now have a general depiction of the political struggle in which black publishing was and is still engaged in with white mainstream institutions. However, given Joyce's documentation of this struggle to produce these black books, questions still remain. How were these black books and other information disseminated to the black community? Was only the black literary community involved in this struggle, or were other members involved? Were any publishing titles more significant than others in terms of the struggle against white racist literature? What was the relationship to black publishing overseas? Joyce's work touches briefly on these issues, although emphasizing some aspects more than others. Indeed, I argue that if one of the primary distribution tools of black publishers, black bookstores, had been investigated thoroughly, many of the answers to these questions would be illuminated. Therefore, I continue below by presenting the first steps of a framework by which black bookstores could be linked to the struggle of black publishers and black political organizations. Multidimensionality in black bookstores. Joyce gives us the first link in his discussion of advertisement and distribution strategies used by black publishers. Throughout these time periods, he reports that publishing programs used many techniques to promote and advertise their books. Direct mail was usually the first choice, newspaper advertising was second, and radio and TV were last choices. Many, however, used other techniques: autograph parties, newsletters, public poetry readings, public lectures, book fairs, and exhibits at conferences, workshops, and conventions. Similarly, many used several channels for distribution, such as national wholesalers and salesmen. However, Joyce notes that most publishers used direct mail and bookstores. Unfortunately, despite this brief notation of the historical importance of black bookstores, missing from Joyce's work is a thorough documentation and analysis of the political role played by black Pan-African bookstores as a distribution source for black publishers and its function for other activists struggling against white racist publication. Moreover, missing from Joyce's analysis is the fact that Black bookstores would be able to incorporate in one place all the aspects of advertising, promotion, and distribution need of publishers. For example, the buying and selling of books, book autograph parties, newsletter production and distribution, public poetry readings and lectures, book fairs, workshops, and conferences all can occur at Black bookstores. Secondly, that book selling is the main function of Black bookstores does not necessarily limit bookshop activity strictly to book selling per se. Indeed, Black bookstores could be multidimensional institutions, and it is this multidimensionality which would again link bookstores not only the Black publishers' struggles, but to the struggle of the entire Black community. For example, there could be a cultural organizational dimension to the Black bookstores. Joyce's work revealed the role that Black cultural organizations played in the battle over Black identity, giving documentation of their active publishing programs and clear-cut political objectives. Moreover, Joyce suggests that Black cultural organizations were gathering places for Black intellectuals, artists, and spiritualists from a variety of backgrounds whose main political purpose was to expose and destroy the lies perpetuated against the Black community by white literary institutions. Additionally, these Black cultural organizations were established to provide a number of other interrelated functions for the Black community. A. To serve as a forum to stimulate reading. B. To spread useful knowledge by providing libraries and reading rooms. C. To provide audiences and critical forums for intellectual and literary works. D. To establish channels for publication. And E. To serve as training arenas for future leaders and orators via debate. With the attributes of Black cultural organizations being as such, it would seem logical to assume that politically oriented Black bookstores could contain Black cultural organizational dimensions as well. For example, at book signing parties, Black bookstores would provide the following for the Black community: a gathering place for leading artists, activists, intellectuals, and general members of literary audience, an archive warehouse of Black information, thereby serving as a place which stimulate reading of political writings of previous Black activists, as places where critical discussions of both contemporary white racist productions and contemporary Black political discourse could occur between patrons and store staff. And given these aspects, bookstores could thus serve as informal day-to-day training grounds for debaters and activists. The final major dimension of Black bookstores would be unification dimension. In terms of numeric presence, reports suggest that more than 300 Black bookstores currently exist across the transatlantic African diaspora. About 300 are in the United States, 6 in England, 4 in Canada, at least 3 in Jamaica, 1 in the Virgin Islands, and at least 1 in South Africa. Undoubtedly, countless unreported others are also in existence. As archives of Black political materials that are more often than not deemed undesirable by the mainstream in some countries, if not banned in others, it seems logical that copies of these materials would be somewhat scarce. Despite this, certain materials would be considered the core materials by Black activists and thus be in high demand. Indeed, these specific materials could be circulated or distributed between Black bookstores themselves in order to meet local and international demand of the community. Now, if these 300-plus Black bookstores do in fact exchange a common set of materials locally and internationally with each other, while also serving as a gathering place for Black activists locally and internationally, it is possible that a unitary fund of Black knowledge based on these core materials could be established at Black bookstores. Given this, it seems plausible that such a common unitary Black knowledge could form the basis and thus produce a common unitary definition of Black identity held by bookstore staff and core bookstore activists and patrons across the diaspora. Publisher's Summary. Our review allows us to provide the following initial framework regarding the historical context in which Black bookstores arose. First, the most heightened surges in Black book publishing occurred during the increased attacks by white institutions and the increase in Black social movement activity. Given these distributive links to Black bookstores, we would expect that a concomitant surge in the establishment of Black bookstores would have occurred as well. Second, Black bookstores are multidimensional institutions. They could therefore incorporate certain dimensions Joyce ascribed to Black cultural organizations. Thus, at book signing parties, lectures, or during the daily store activity, we would expect the bookstores to function as a. Archives of the Black diasporic experience as told from a Black point of view, b. Gathering places for leading artists, activists, intellectuals, and general members of the Black community, c. As archives of the Black experience, they serve as places which stimulate reading of political writing of Black activists of the past, d. Given the cross-section of people gathering at the store functions as an area where critical discussions occur concerning contemporary white racist productions and Black identity. E. As such, they thus serve as informal training grounds for debaters and activists. Third, despite the large numbers of bookstores within the United States and across the African diaspora, there will be a common set of core material found at and exchanged between Black bookstores, which serves to produce a common political definition of Black identity. In turn, this common definition of Black identity may serve as a unifying function among Black bookstore staff and activists who patronize the stores across the diaspora. Fourth, as a multi-dimensional unifying link between the gatekeepers of Black identity, Black publishers and authors, and the recipients of that identity, the Black diaspora community, it seems plausible to expect that a multi-dimensional structure and activities of institutions such as Black bookstores could have a crucial, relatively autonomous function in overall Black literary struggle. Our review of Black political institutions, such as Black publishing, has placed in our grasp the initial beginnings by which we can approach the study of Black bookstores. Indeed, we are now prepared to critically analyze the empirical work done on Black bookstores and political bookstores. It is this to which we now turn.
Okle-dokles. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. We will pick up, I'm on page 26 of Dr. Beckles' dissertation. We'll pick up, the subheading is Political Bookstores as Sites of Resistance, right in the middle of page 26. Katherine Massey Book Club. Folks have thoughts on the first chunk of the reading. The number to dial, 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I will say quickly, our identity is victims of white supremacy. I don't have no Negro identity and Pan-African identity. Victims of white supremacy. Period. Any hoodles. Since we are reading the late Dr. Beckles' dissertation, Suicide at Age 34, let us compare and contrast as we get into his dissertation with the book we just read, and that is contrasting a book with a dissertation. So there should be lots of differences. But talking about the exact same subject, black bookstores, racism, similarities, differences between these two books. I was able to go back and check. I was correct. Char Adams, victim of racism herself, she does not include any information with regards to Dr. Beckles' work. She gives him a shout out in the conclusion and in the acknowledgments, but there is no, oh yeah, his dissertation, he says this, or blah, 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 or the importance in the actual body of the book, or specific details from all of his great scholarship that we're about to read right now. So you can think about that, and more broadly, comparing these two works that are about 30 years apart. Where's the overlap, differences? What do we think as we get into? And again, this is our first time reading a non-book. Might be a little bit more challenging because he's kind of laying out the groundwork for his project, his study right here. But I thought all of that was very relevant, important as well. Any hoodles. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. Feel free to drop a line. We'll read our emails as we proceed as well. I guess I'll ask too. This is, not a short document, full dissertation. Got in depth with it, comprehensive. Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller to come. Lots of illustrations too. Who do we think was the intended audience for this report? Published at UCLA. Who was he writing this for? Certainly seems like he's serious about countering racism. We'll get more into that as we go, but I mean, man, who would get their hands on such a document? Generally speaking, you would have to go to a college campus. You could visit, right? I'm not a student at the University of Washington, never have been, but it's public. Anybody can stroll through and you could get this document. But I mean, man, generally speaking, a document like this, Leroy, Lakeisha, would they just be walking around with Pan-African sites of, or even how do you access a document like this? Just something to ponder on as we've never read a dissertation before in the book club. So, hey, something to ponder on. Have any of you read a dissertation before just for giggles? I can put my hand up. And hey, I can put my hand up and point to the Cow's archive as evidence. We have had a lot of people come on this program and talk about dissertations that I thought were very important. Like what? They Don't See Us, Dr. Antoine Tomlin. He was a black male who came on December 2022 and talked about the absence of black male teachers and all the racism that black male educators experience en route to the classroom. Can I think of another? We just had people come on the program like recently and talk about their dissertations on like minstrelsy and all kinds of, lots of them. There's so many, but like I said, there is no subject matter that I just got a dissertation days ago. COINTELPRO, the Black Panther Party, and the cartoons that they put. Oh my God. This just came out like months ago, literally. So reading more important than watching television, and that's why you want to take advantage. Go if you have a local community college, university, go. If it's public, even a lot of the ones that are private, they still, if you live there, you can go hang out, see what books they have, check their catalog. They have all kinds of digital goodies that you can just download, boop, and go and read, study at your leisure. Oh, it's one coming, I forgot. It's not a dissertation, but one coming on Monday as well. Very important. There are a ton of white people study racism more than anything in the world. This is a black author, but white people study and they catalog. They study and then they go and catalog all kinds of research. Anyway, let's see. Folks who have commentary on the first chunk of the dissertation. Let's see. Lauren should be with us.
Yes, sir. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First, at the very beginning, give me a second. I didn't know what snowball sampling was, so I had to Google that. And the internet said it was a non-probability chain referral technique where existing research participants recruit future subjects from their network, often used to access hidden or hard-to-reach populations. It is ideal for studies on niche, specialized, or stigmatized groups. Yeah, I didn't know that. I made quite a few highlights, but I only have a few notes. One where he says Bloomer elaborates the nature of an object. Any and every object consists of the meaning that it has for the person for whom it is an object. This meaning sets the way in which he is prepared to act toward it and the way in which he is ready to talk about it. I thought that was super interesting and super important. Let me see. There was another part. It said, utilizing the canons of social science literature as their database, Mudimbi and Said, I hope I'm pronouncing those correctly, reviewed Western social science discourses on Africans and Orientals. They searched for the process by which the original negative racist meanings associated with Africans or Orientals' racial identities were generated. I'm not sure the exact process, and I'm not sure it can be ascertained without a time machine. But I do think that the group of people who call themselves white or their ancestors did so, and in doing so, made every other person non-white and just subject to mistreatment and domination. And I think, I don't want to make it seem like what they're doing, what they're researching is not valuable, but I'm not sure that a large amount of time should be spent on it. I think really we should be thinking about how to solve the problem, if that makes sense. But scholarship is important. I thought it was interesting when they were talking about like the ordering, the classifying. I don't know if they used the word taxonomy, but I do think that white people spend a lot of time just with classification, of organizing of everything into specific groups. There was another part. It said, this is because the notion of a power struggle is totally absent. There is only power and domination, and that power resides in the center of society and these white institutions. Resistance to that domination by those in the margins of power remains untheorized because it is assumed that marginalized social actors are powerless to resist the discourse produced by white mainstream institutions. I think that marginalized social actors, that means non-white people, and white mainstream institutions, that's just white people. And I think that we do have the ability to resist the discourse produced by white people. This is exemplified by Mr. Fuller's code book and his word guide, and the attempt by non-white people to use words in a more accurate manner. Being aware of how language supports white supremacy, racism. Consequently, racial structures and the meanings of race categories produced by these sites are constantly being formed, transformed, destroyed, and reformed via the process of political struggle. I don't know, man. White people do the classifying. They decide who gets to be a white person and who gets subjected to non-white classification. And there was another sentence, a paragraph in here, pretty long, and I don't need, it's the one that started with, finally, they suggest that we also view these series of sites of resistance not in the normal macro-analytic way, but as macro structures in which micro interactions occur. Located as such, we would then be able to witness the continuity and reciprocity between the two levels occurring within these sites. Given this, these sites of resistance would be arenas in which discursive power struggles over the meaning of racial identity could be witnessed at both the micro and macro levels of social life. Now, reading this passage and this dissertation so far, I am very appreciative of the way that Mr. Fuller was able to articulate his ideas in plain language. While it was, in my view, scholarly, it was easier to understand than this sort of writing that seems to be it seems to abound in the academy. I think language should be clear or plain. Things should be called by their proper or most accurate name, not necessarily the longest or most widely used or the terms accepted and or preferred by white people for obvious reasons. It's just, the language so far, it makes it a little more difficult to understand. And I wanted to comment on that and also just be appreciative of Mr. Fuller and his work. Let me see. I'm not sure if I have any more notes. Give me a second. I think that's all I have for that first session. Thank you. Oh, I did. You asked a question before we got started, Gus, and you said who was the author writing this for? And I think he wrote it for the white people at the university. He's trying to get his PhD. And while the subject matter is, so far seems constructive, it doesn't seem like it was written for us, although it could be helpful. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Lauren. Get his PhD at UCLA, so yeah. Let's see. Shout out to Mr. Fuller. Definitely a difference in language and the vocabulary employed. That also might be a part of what is required to get that PhD. They don't just give those out for free at UCLA. Our narrator, who has read for us before, not AI this time, she commented on the vocabulary used in this as well. She would certainly have a unique perspective having to narrate all this. Great job for the first section, Gus T. So relieved, unburdened to not have to narrate, especially this, because the verbiage and so dense and academic with the jargon. Let's see. This is my first time reading a large research document, and I am hopeful that the dissertation won't be perceived as too technical for your general audience. Some could find it drags because there isn't a story to follow. However, she has that in all caps, I learned so much about a scientific approach to making observations of racism, a process for data gathering, snowball collecting, is clearly outlined. The writer cites so many other researchers and sociologists that at times I got sidetracked looking up information on them. That does happen, and he does have footnotes. I think this is a valuable read, but it is different, and I hope it is received well. But even if it isn't, so what? Hey, somebody does say that from time to time. Solve the problem, right? Absolutely. I was stunned to learn that the writer took his own life, died by suicide at such a young age, 34. I only learned about his work after you sent me the dissertation. even when I got the dissertation, I did not know that he passed away at 34. I mean, man, it's tragic that such a scientific thinker who was attempting to understand racism in a serious way was not able to continue his work. Dr. Welsing nor Mr. Fuller have come up in what I have read, yet they are a-comin'. I'm looking forward to reading about their role in his study. Awesome job to the narrator. We'll get in some of the other written commentary as we proceed. Let's see, I'll get in a few of my notes and then get in some of the other emails. If you have commentary, *61 on the first chunk of the reading. Let's see. Going back, and I do think it's important, even though Dr. Beckles, he wrote this dissertation at UCLA. He ended up teaching here in Washington State and in Eastern Washington, so the opposite side of where Seattle and Gusty is. I think that is important. That I have talked about that. Now, I have not hung out at Washington State. That's Pullman, unless I've been misinformed. I have not hung out there, but I have talked to black people who are alumnus from that region, and man, there are not a lot of black people. There are not a lot of black people, as I'm told, in Eastern Washington, period. And then there are not a lot of black people in the area of Washington State. So I don't know how that would have impacted this research to be doing and talking about this sort of subject matter. He also wrote a report about the FBI's attacks on black books, or COINTELPRO, and FBI attacks on black bookstores. So doing that sort of work before the 2000s in an environment like that. And I have to confirm, Dr. Beckles may have been in a tragic arrangement. I'm not sure. I have to double check with his spouse, who is named in the text and the acknowledgments too. But all of that may have combined to, certainly impact his mental health and doing all of this research in that sort of environment. But we'll think about that as we write. And even, can we confirm about his partner? Was he in a tragic arrangement? We'll confirm as we roll. Again, his partner in the acknowledgments. Let's see, I'll nab a few of my notes. Let's see. He talks about Black Bookstore. He does use the word community here. He talks about Black Bookstores serving as critical meeting, organization, and recruiting center for black activists, as a gathering place which linked writers, activists, intellectuals, and everyday black community, the everyday black community, serving as informal debate and alternative education centers. They served as a critical node in an international network of resistance. Black bookstores experienced repression by the U.S. FBI agents, British police, and racist organizations. Black bookstores used a variety of strategies to withstand this repression. All of that very important in kind of a roadmap of what to expect in this book. Hopefully in plain, that was kind of plain language, so hopefully it'll be like that when we get to those parts of the book. But just one, I don't know that we've read too many books that talk about racism as a global enterprise. Most of the books that we've read, and most of the books that I find, period, they focus on racism as a very local project in this town, in this state, in this country. It is very rare. This is a global system, structure, and even looking at the resistance as global, and black people trying to share information and be constructive in different parts of the world. That is kind of rare to get books and read books like that. I think that is better because this problem is global, to get us out of that kind of localized, narrow way of looking at this massive problem. The alternative education centers, I guess I hadn't thought as much on that, but certainly for lots of folks who are denied information, and certainly to get access to accurate information about the world in which we live, yeah, that would be true. The repression by the British police, I also think that's important, where it's globally white people do the same thing. And even to think about that, like, man, the police all around the world are upset about black people reading books about racism. Wow. More reading. And they even said, he said, black bookstores experienced repression by U.S. FBI agents, the British police, and racist organizations. That is so vague and nebulous. Like, what is that? Random group of white people got together and said, we got niggers reading books. We need to do something about that. Let's make a club. What? Hopefully we'll get lots of straightforward detail to explain that as we move forward. One of those kind of bigger, maybe get your PhD type phrasings, counter-hegemonic discourse. I think Mr. Fuller might call that counter-racism. Much easier to understand. And I will say, when I saw that, people do use the term in the academy, white-dominated colleges, universities, they will use the term hegemony for supremacy. And I have heard many authors, even some of our guests, white hegemony as opposed to white supremacy. Let's see. He says right beneath counter-hegemonic discourse, counter-racism, he says, black activists argue that white mainstream discourse has been dominant in the battle produced via the white mainstream control of major social institutions. The enemy attempts to subordinate blackness by positioning or hiding black identity within, beneath, or behind white identity. That's one of those where, I don't know if you call that like academic jargon, but I certainly, again, the issue for me is not black identity. That's not the problem at all. It is not about black and proud, and you don't tell me what it means to be black. That's not the problem at all. The problem is mistreating all the people that you say are not white, and the darker they are, the more mistreatment. People that you classify as black. That is the issue, not Negro identity. So I would not phrase it as subordinating blackness. It would just be you mistreat people who you say are black, period. And there's lots of ways you can articulate that, but you mistreat people. It's lots of ways they do that. You lie. You don't give them correct housing. You don't give help. You lie. You kill them for nothing. Lots of ways. But I mean, subordinating blackness, positioning or hiding black identity, I think there are lots of better ways that could be stated. Let's see. And again, that might have been, that's the way I need to say this to get out of UCLA with this piece of paper. Got it. Important footnote I'm going to read. This is footnote number 2 on page 2. Gilroy and Martin generally agree that a Pan-African is a person of African descent who feels a sense of racial oneness, community, that C word again, with other people of African descent. It is used to connote the notion of diaspora. Mr. Fuller said he hated that word. This is how the term will be used in this study and will be used interchangeably with the terms black or African. Negro would be fine with me. Victim of white supremacy would be best. But Pan-African, Black African, all same thing, at least in the context of Dr. Beckles' work here. Let's see. Where he says on page 4, are the Pan-African bookstores aware of each other's struggle? If so, what are the inter-store links? By what process is information exchanged between the stores? How do the bookshops' inter-shop relations affect each other's presentation of black identity? I think we can answer affirmatively from Char Adams' work that it did seem there was quite a bit of networking between bookstores. I remember the young black male, I believe it was with Caribou Books, they ventured all the way out to California to study SO1 and networked with them and talked on the phone to get information. So it seems like then, I think there were other examples of that we read as well. So it seemed like there was quite a bit of sharing, exchanging information, and different ways that the bookstores were under attack and trying to not make some of the same mistakes that some of the earlier black bookstores made. I do remember quite a bit of that. We'll see what he uncovers here in the text. Let's see. He mentions the so-called negritude movement. We talked about that during the last text, I believe. Leopold Sédar Senghor, Aimé Césaire. This is around Frantz Fanon's compatriots, same kind of time frame. I think many of these people ended up in tragic arrangements as well. Let's see. Moving to chapter 1. He says the question of whether or not the differential access to power structurally determines what becomes known as objective reality, the truth, or a fact is an issue which divides the field. I thought that was important. I don't know if the field is still divided on that, but those in power generally, that is power. We get the ability to decide what is, and it's nothing you can do about it frequently, and that is often what happens in the system of white supremacy. Let's see. I appreciate, again, most of the books that we read, that I read, that we've read in the Katherine Massey Book Club, and most of the books that I read about racism, and you can just, what we heard, Carla Hayden, former librarian at the Library of Congress, we heard her at the very beginning. All of the books that she recommended, they do not discuss racism as a global power structure. It focused on the life and times of James Brown, tragic arrangement. Focused on the Underground Railroad, important, but that's not a global system of white supremacy racism. And even focusing on, so-called integration of friends with white people or whatever the case may be, like none of that is global system of white people dominating non-white people. It's just, in my view, it is rare to read a report document from non-white people that we're going to be talking about racism as a global enterprise, and even non-white people working against racism as a global enterprise. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, he uses the term non-white. Man, I certainly can, agree with Lauren. She spoke earlier about in appreciating Mr. Fuller's work, where it is much easier to digest, make it plain. The title of Minister Malcolm X's documentary. This has a lot more academic jargon in the text, again, to get his UCLA PhD. But Dr. Beckles does use the term non-white. That is kind of, whoa. I mean, I don't see that term used too frequently. And I mean, hey, he was going to bump into Dr. Welsing and such in his work, and Mr. Fuller even, and they both use the term non-white. So I don't know if he was influenced, or maybe some of the bookstores are using that term at the time. But hey, that is, now we are making some progress, getting away from other people of color, marginalized, non-white, victims of white supremacy, even better. Let's see. This is on page 12. He says, the critical theory position suggests that actors become rigidly guided by historic structures or unwittingly allow their realities to become constituted by the discourse of traditional institutional structures. I think that is frequently the case. particularly, you think about the number of non-white people victims of white supremacy. They are just guided unwittingly. Do what Mr. Fuller got at the front of all of his books. If you do not understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. That's unwittingly. That's the vast majority of non-white people I know allow their realities, the way, what they think, what they value, what they think is important, what they think their life should be about, what they think of themselves is constituted by individuals classified as white, directly or indirectly, constituted by the system of white supremacy, what I just said, white people. That's most of us. And even if you become aware, okay, and it just becomes a battle to try to work against that. Still a victim of racism. Let's see. I'm going to have to look at his footnotes to see which scholars he cites in the text. That also would be interesting, since this is for his PhD at UCLA, to see, what folks influence his thinking about this. Let's see. Consistently he talks about black people around the world. Just in my time reading about racism, that is extremely unique. Most black people do not talk about non-white people, globally black people around the universe. I mean, you hear it now. It's foundational black this and, all that. That is kind of an odd thing. Let's see. Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller would both be in that unique constructive group. Let's see. Dr. Kamban as well. A number of folks we've talked to. Let's see. He says, what of those institutions, not necessarily defined by the political nature, the black church, press, radio stations, and publishers have also had a continuous impact, functioning as formal empowerment centers for the black community. That word again, actually both of them, community and empowerment centers. I don't know if I would say the black radio is a black empowerment center, even though it has been constructed from time to time. But all of those different platforms that he mentioned, the black church, black press, black radio stations, black publishers, all under attack. And I might even say all of them have been substantially weakened vis-a-vis where they were 75 years ago. Like the black church now compared to where it was in 1950. I think it was in a better shape then than it was now. You have lots of black people now that, not doing no church and stay and watch YouTube. And then the black press, so-called. Now, the press, if they're talking about newspapers, that is doing poor across white people, non-white people, everybody in this part of the world. So that's not just a black people thing, but certainly black press would be included in that for black newspapers. Black radio stations, same thing. And black publishers, talking about books, same thing. All under attack, under the system of white supremacy, and even to get all of them to not seriously address the system of white supremacy racism. Don't bring that up in the chat. We don't need no more Dr. Kings here stirring up trouble. Talk about forgiveness and, do some food or whatever like that. But you're not in here stirring up no trouble to upset white people. Same thing for the newspaper. Get your subscriptions, get your advertisements, radio stations, same thing. Publishers, why don't you get some fiction? Find you a new hate you give. We don't need no more, code books and ISIS papers and all this upsetting white folks. Let's see. He mentions the book Gatekeepers of Black Culture. That sounds kind of interesting. The full title, make sure I got it. Gatekeepers of Black Culture, Black-Owned Book Publishing in the United States, 1817 to 1981, by Donald F. Joyce. Sounds kind of interesting. This is one of those books that is difficult to find. Published in 1983. 3 white people. Now, they'll go and give all kinds of fiction and such. Color Purple was published at the same time. They'll have that every bookstore you can imagine. Gatekeepers of Black Culture. Let me see how much this is, if it's on Amazon. Let me see if this is, and how much is it if it's on Amazon. Let's see. Okay. $67.60 for Gatekeepers of it. That's what I see. See, that's the exact same thing we're talking about, how white people control access to information. Talked about that with was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment, where that book was like $200, $300, something ridiculous. I've seen the ISIS papers, Dr. Welsing's book on Amazon. I've seen that for like $100. So they make it really pricey. Like, whoa, is that what is going on? System of white supremacy. Let's see. But that one does look interesting. I'm going to see if I can get my hands on that one too. Let's see. This is on page 19. Various aspects of the black I need to see how many times that word is in here. Community seem to be establishing their own particular publishing houses. Thus, black women's publishing houses appear in the 1970s. Other types of black publishing houses appeared as well, which seem to follow the ideological division found within the black community, falling along race, class, and gender lines. Now, I found that passage interesting, and I'm hoping he'll give more details on that. So you get the civil rights movement, black people are talking about racism, books are being published where black people are talking about racism, and then black women's publishing houses appear in the 1970s. He doesn't say black males, patriarchal black dudes. He doesn't say that. Black women's. Are there any other niche black publishing houses? What were they? I know we got Third World Press. What were they? That's like a very gender specific, and this is in the era when I thought was like near the peak of black male privilege. Did they have a black male publishing house? This is for Leroy. We writing books for Leroy, about Leroy, and Leroy wrote them, published them too. Leroy. Did that exist? Because like what book was it? Like, I've never heard of that. I already mentioned The Color Purple and Michelle Wallace, Black Macho, and The Myth of the Black Superwoman, all that stuff that came out during that era. Like, dang. Is that even, I was thinking, is that the response system of white supremacy, racism, that just, as opposed to all of the non-white people together, all the black people at minimum together? No, we can start, see if we can break that up, get them fighting amongst each other and get these gender wars on. And yeah, blame Leroy. Yeah, blame Lakeisha. Yeah. Then blame the niggers in the Caribbean. Yeah, it's their fault. Yeah, them Caribbean niggers. Yeah. The man, the woman, white people, they are the problem. Let's see. Get you to divide you to race, class, gender lines, get you to make up anything to fight with each other about. Let's see. On page 22, let's see, says, black cultural organizations were gathering places for black intellectuals, artists, and spiritualists from a variety of backgrounds whose main political purpose was to expose and destroy the lies perpetuated against the black community by white literary institutions. Additionally, these black cultural organizations were established to provide a number of other interrelated functions for the black community. A, to serve as a forum to stimulate reading. I can even stop right there, even though I did highlight the rest of it. Man, like, I had not really thought of that, but given what we just read, Char Adams, and previous work in Silence or Indifference, that would be an important counter-racist effort for black people in particular to do activities, ways of engaging, using your time and energy that encourage reading, and not reading of texts, not reading Iceberg Slim, reading about racism. That would be very valuable. I did not do that. I did before. I bumped into Mr. Fuller's work, Dr. Welsing's work, that sort of thing. I did not invest time reading seriously about racism. And I can say that's something most of the non-white people, most of the people classified as black that I've been around in my life, the vast majority of us, we do not. Like these people that I've been around, they invest hours watching television every day, not even minutes reading a book about racism on any day. Hours watching YouTube, Netflix, whatever. Zero even listening to a book. Let's say they got the Audible, even 0 minutes. That is very common. So that would be just figuring out a different way. Even if it is, we're going to listen to a lecture of Neely Fuller Jr. and he's going to be at the Black Bookstore. Even that, we're stumbling in the direction. We're at the bookstore. We might find the book. Fuller might rest around and say something cute. I might read his book. Mention another book. Cute girl there. Say, hey, you want to meet up next time we talk about the book? Yes, sir. I will have it read. But anything to encourage black people to read, and reading seriously about racism. It continued. That was just A. B was to spread useful knowledge by providing libraries and reading rooms. We already read from Char Adams that white people worked aggressively, wouldn't even let black people go to the library a lot of places, and to have a spot to sit, think, read, and discuss a book. Very constructive. You might get some people to start thinking about ways of solving the problem of racism. Fuller said he got to a quiet spot, mountain in Japan, thinking about this problem and started writing a book about racism. White people do not want that at all. Let's see. C, to provide audiences and critical forums for intellectual and literary works. That also is important because white people have lots of forums where they can use their brain computer and are encouraged to use their brain computer to think about how they're going to maintain the system of white supremacy, and even literature to discuss different strategies for maintaining the system of white supremacy. They get to do that all the time. We don't. Establish channels for publication and to serve as training arenas for future leaders and orators via debate. I hadn't really thought about that either, but I guess, yeah, you would. They had, I think we read Black-Owned, she said that they would have book clubs like this at some of the bookstores so you could come and talk, chat it up about the books, get more comfortable doing some public speaking, improve, refine your ability to present ideas and think about racism in a logical manner, become more persuasive in how you present your ideas, all of that. And again, white people would not want black people to be engaging in any of this. You're supposed to be drunk. Where's the mad dog? Where's the smoke? And see, the difference when you're in an environment like this, it's not filled with reefer smoke. You don't have all the boom, da boom, da boom. You can barely hear somebody talking, all that. You don't have all the crazy lights and it's dark and you can't see the emergency exits when the fire breaks out. It's relatively quiet in most of the bookstores that I've been to. They might have a little bit of, music on, but it's not boom, boom, boom. It's not that sort of thing. It's well lit. You could actually sit and read. They have comfortable chairs. You can sit down and, oh, wow. And you might even bump into, I think we might keep reading. Hey, if you're in the correct bookstore at the correct time, hey, it's Dr. Welsing. What you been reading this week, Dr. Welsing? What'd you say? You been reading Medical Apartheid? Oh, I'm going to go get that one. Okay, she said she reading medical. That sort of thing. Again, white people would not want any of that. Vehemently opposed to all of that. In fact, you're supposed to be smoking Newports or reefer or both, or ready to cut somebody or shoot somebody. All of the above, maybe. Let's see. Says the Black bookstores served as gathering places for leading artists, activists, intellectuals, and general members of the literary audience, an archive warehouse of black information, thereby serving as places which stimulate reading of political writings of previous black activists. That is sorely missed when you have an environment like that. That would tend to erode having lots of black people who know nothing in detail about Rosa Parks, Dr. King. If you like, oh, we have books on these people and different books to talk about these people, and we could point you exactly where you should read. That would super important. White people have lots of those warehouses for white supremacy history and racists that they should revere for the next 500 years. They have lots of that. We do not. Places where critical discussions of both contemporary white racist productions and contemporary black political discourse could occur between patrons and store staff. We heard about that with SO1, Mr. Fugate, ready to talk or give recommendations, having black authors in. Dr. Welsing drops by the store all the time. Mr. Fuller drops by the store all the time. Let's see. It says the bookstores could thus serve as informal day-to-day training grounds for debaters and activists, future counter-racists. White people do not want any of that. Oh man, I thought this was important too. I took a lot of notes on page 23. He says, counting bookstores. He says, reports suggest that there are more than 300 black bookstores currently exist across the transatlantic African diaspora. About 300 are in the United States, 6 are in England, 4 are in Canada, at least 3 are in Jamaica, 1 in the Virgin Islands, and at least 1 in South Africa. Now, when I saw that, I thought lots of things. One, I was reminded Dr. Paul Thomas, he was recently with us from Norway. Many of our other guests have talked about they're so grateful for all of the labor that black people in the U.S. have put forward into solving this problem. That disparity in Negro bookstores is gargantuan, like 300 to, let's see if I can count it, 300 here in the U.S. to 10, 13, 15 Negro bookstores outside of the continental U.S. 300 once you step onto these shores. Wow. And they've been under FBI attack and all of that the whole time. Like, wow. I can see more what they mean in terms of, okay, you all have done a lot to help us. Lots of books have come out of the U.S. Wow, that doesn't mean they don't write books in other places, but that would tend to suggest it might be a few more books here about this problem. And then just, wow, like, do white people fight against bookstores that much? I mean, 1 in South Africa? Now, this is 30 years old, so hopefully that has changed, but I feel, shouldn't that be a WTF? All of the niggers that they got in South Africa, and you're on a continent that is chock full of dark people. 1 on Steve Biko, Robert Sobukwe, Winnie Mandela. 1 black bookstore in South Africa? 1? A+ for white people. Wow. Wow. Even some of these other numbers, like Canada is a big freaking country, so-called. 4. You don't even have 1 in every province. 4? You could have 4 Negro bookstores in the province of Ontario alone, I would think. Toronto was right there. It's a lot of dark people in Toronto. 4? Again, it's 30 years old, so hopefully, these numbers have, but even still, like, wow, white people have done a phenomenal job, and reading is more important than reading about racism, nonfiction. The books that Carla Hayden mentioned at the beginning, she mentioned a number of fiction books and authors who are known for writing fiction. Victims Guaranteed qualified. President Trump fired her anyway. Reading nonfiction is more important than watching television, even documentaries. Let's see. It was historical fiction, but it still got that F word on it. Let's see. As archives of black political materials that are more often than not deemed undesirable by the mainstream in some countries, and when he says by the mainstream, rather by white people, if not banned in others, it seems logical that copies of these materials would be somewhat scarce. You mean like gatekeepers of black culture being $67.60 on Amazon? You mean like was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment being $300 on Amazon? Yes, white people are amazing at making books like this. Matter of fact, I remember we had the author, or not author, he was trying to make a film, but we talked about the book They Closed Their Schools, which talked about when white people closed public schools in Virginia for 5 years, as opposed to so-called integrating. White people bought copies of all that book that they could find and burned them. Fahrenheit 415, and this is like way back, this is like in the 60s when they did all this. And he said it is for years, like they republished it finally, but he said for a long time it was very difficult to find that book in Virginia. And that book is very plain spoken about the white people, and we ain't going to school with no Negroes. Let's see. Anything else in the first section? Might be, I guess, okay for the first portion. I will double check, make sure, *61, make sure we didn't miss any folks who have commentary on portion A, and then I guess I can get in a teaspoon from our second email. Let's see. I'll get in a little bit from email number 2, and then we'll push off to the second audio segment. Let's see. Email number 2, greetings Gus, listeners, and callers. Is this the first time we have read a PhD thesis in the book club? I suspect so. Dissertation, technically, but yes, first time reading a non-book. My impression is that PhD theses are written for a small audience, namely one theses committee, for they are the only ones who primarily determine if your thesis is worthy of conferring the degree. For that reason, I thought it would be interesting to get some background on the members of Dr. Beckles' committee. Teshom Gabriel, Ethiopian-born American cinema scholar, expert in cinema of Africa and the developing world, professor at the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television in Los Angeles. Immigrated to the U.S. in 1962. I suspect he is non-white. Raymond Rocco, Professor Emeritus, Department of Political Science, UCLA. From his picture online, I am not sure of his racial classification, but his scholarship seems to be mostly in Latino studies. Ivan Cisalini, born in Hungary. As of 2010, he is Dean of Social Sciences at NYU, Abu Dhabi. He has been professor of multiple prestigious institutions in the U.S. in the field of sociology, including UCLA, where he was on the thesis committee of Dr. Beckles. I think he is a suspected racist based on his picture. Walter Allen Committee Chair, Professor in Higher Education, Sociology, and African American Studies, UCLA in 1978. He joined the faculty at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, one of the first black faculty members. Abstract. This project investigated how black bookstores functioned historically as Pan-African sites of resistance, institutions engaged in a battle with white mainstream institutions over the meaning of black identity. There is a lot to unpack in this passage: resistance, battle, identity. Hopefully the author will help to clarify this, for sure. 2, they served as a critical node in the international network of resistance. I am interested in the international network of resistance. As I said, most of the books that I read, there is no talk of Negroes working together around the world to do something about racism. That's kind of rare. Introduction. Throughout the various parts of the African diaspora, black activists have been engaged in a struggle over the meaning of black identity. I hope the author helps me to understand what black identity means. I think it means Negro, victim of racism. I could be wrong. 2. Pan-African is a person of African descent who feels a sense of racial oneness, community with other people of African descent. It is used to connote the notion of diaspora. I am confused. If the term is used interchangeably, then do all the terms mean the same thing? He does say that. He has that footnote that I read, Pan-African, African, Black, they all mean the same thing. Yes, he says that explicitly. Chapter 1, page 27, the legacy of Black sites resisting being forced to live beneath twin pillars of race and class domination. People of African descent across the globe have had to organize to protect their communities and resist these structures of domination. Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Organization, Garvey's UNIA, was the most extensive Pan-African resistance institution within the U.S. The resistance efforts of political organizations such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Black Panthers, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Black Church, Press, Radio. I was curious why the Nation of Islam was not included in this, leaving out Malcolm X. Not as much longevity as some of these other organizations. That might be one. I don't know if that's a smaller kind of niche than some of these others. Like, I don't think the Nation of Islam, I don't think even at their peak of popularity was ever as big as Marcus Garvey or the NAACP. I guess they were bigger than the Black Panther Party, I reckon. I guess. Let's see. 2. One institution that has escaped extensive academic documentation and analysis, Black Pan-African bookstores, as their bookstore role would seem most to be closely associated with that of publishing. We turn now to specifically review the political legacy of Black publishers. The author seems to be initiating his argument that this is original research in an area that has not been studied. I think that is probably true, because Char Adams, she said, and this is published like months ago, she said that she wrote the first serious treatment investigation of Black books. This isn't even a book. This is his dissertation. So yeah, it seems like they might both be right that this is, for whatever reason, an area that has not garnered a lot of serious study. I think Char Adams said in 2025 that they still don't really have an accurate count on how many Black bookstores they have in the U.S., which would, to me, further suggest there's not really a serious study and value on these institutions. Let's see. 3. The original surge in Black publishing activity came during the 19th century abolitionist movement. The second surge in Black publishing activity came during the late part of the 19th and early part of the 20th century, again as a response to the plethora of racist, social, Darwinist-based writings, films, and policies produced by many of the nation's white intellectual, artistic, and political leaders. Birth of a Nation came out during this time period. Interesting how he organizes the history of Black publishing different from the previous book club selection, Black-Owned. I have to go back to look to see at the different, I guess, groundswells of when Char Adams says Black publishing had its peak periods in this part of the world. Let's see. He pointed out the same thing I did. Page 30, we see again a new proliferation of Black publishing institutions and cultural organizations with publishing programs producing Black books, magazines, articles, and newspapers. Moreover, various aspects of the Black community seem to be establishing their own particular publishing houses. Thus, Black women's publishing houses appear in the 1970s. Other types of Black publishing houses appeared as well. Was this separation fostered by the racist white supremacists? Good question. All the discussion of anti-sexual literature seemingly to the exclusion of Black males in the last book club. Absolutely. And this is the time period when a lot of that stuff became really popular, mainstreamed, and all the rest of it. So, usual suspects. Okay, making sure I didn't get too far ahead. Okay. 5. I argue that if one of the primary distribution tools of Black publishers, Black bookstores, had been investigated thoroughly, many of the answers to these questions would be illuminated. Therefore, I continue below by presenting the first steps of a framework by which black bookstores could be linked to the struggle of organizations. My understanding is that for a PhD thesis, it has to be completely original research. Thus, the author is making the case that his work fills in the gaps of an area which has not been studied before. I think he's correct, unless, I certainly do not qualify as an expert on anything, but like I said, Char Adams kind of seemed to say the same thing. And yeah, I would be hard pressed to pick out, like, does anybody else know books that have studied black bookstores? I don't. I think he might be right. They both might be right. 6. Joyce suggests the black cultural organizations were gathering places for black intellectuals, artists, and spiritualists from a variety of backgrounds whose main political purpose was to expose and destroy the lies perpetrated against the black community by white literary institutions. Additionally, to serve as a forum to stimulate reading, which I just read, are there examples of these leaders and orators? That would be a good question. You'd have to go, I guess we'd have to go and ask different folks, did you go hang out in black bookstores at all? To see yeah, I don't know. To see if that does Barack Obama count? He was at Esalen Books, doing the talk. He said nobody even show up to hear our black brother, our Hawaiian brother speak. Does he count? I don't know. I would have to, good question. I guess we'd have to ask, folks, all the leaders of black people are white. But I don't know. We'd have to hear, Al Sharpton, did you go to black bookstores and sharpen your skills and get books and access to information, get your confidence to get up there and tell folks how it is about this here problem? That'd be something to ask. It seems logical, but yeah, that's a good question to ask. Is there evidence to show that this is true, that this was happening? We'll pause there and get back to the text. If folks have commentary that they did not get to share, write it down. We'll get back to I think we're still in the first portion of chapter 1. So we'll get back to Dr. Beckles' work, and then we'll come back to continue our discussion. Again, reading more important than watching television. We are reading the dissertation of Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles, Pan-African Sites of Resistance. Katherine Massey Book Club, audio segment number 2.
Political bookstores as sites of resistance. While there are no extensive publications which analyze the functions of black bookstores, we have seen some initial insights gleaned from oral history, journalist, and ethnographic work of Hopkins, Kirschenbaum, and Eastland. Beginning with Hopkins' oral history work, he presents the series of interviews held with Alfred Ligon, the owner, manager, and founder of the nation's oldest active black bookstores, Aquarian Bookstore, in Los Angeles, California. To prepare for his research, Hopkins reviewed archival documents and contacted 2 friends of Ligon for cross-validation. In total, Hopkins conducted a series of 3 one-hour-long interviews over a 2-month period. The interview proceeded chronologically, and the questions were open-ended. Hopkins' research focused primarily on the development of Ligon's role as a leader for Los Angeles' black community. However, scattered throughout his research, one can find information about the bookstore. The following activities reportedly took place regularly at the Aquarian Bookshop. The staff ordered, stored, and distributed books about black life that challenged information disseminated by mainstream educational institutions. Photographs and posters of African kings, queens, and everyday black people from around the world were displayed in the shop. Black music from around the world was periodically played on the store tape player. Formal discussions, forums, and everyday store interactions allowed intellectuals and community members alike to debate the meaning of their black identity. The store was frequented by people from the Los Angeles community as well as from elsewhere in the U.S. and across the diaspora. Hopkins' work gives us an initial glimpse as to how Black bookstores have functioned multidimensionally as sites of resistance. However, many questions still remain. First, as this was not a study of the bookstore per se, the level of detail necessary for a thorough understanding of the bookstore activities and its relationship to the greater community is lacking. Secondly, his work was restricted to oral history interviews with Ligon alone and brief meetings with two of Ligon's friends. Due to the fact that much of the bookstore activity would not be documented, Hopkins had to rely primarily on the memory of the owner for information, thus necessitating the use of oral history. Moreover, Hopkins supplemented the data via accessing archival information in order to further enhance his research. What Hopkins failed to do was to cross-validate the oral history with members of other Black bookstores. Indeed, Omni and Winans suggested that sites of resistance should not be conceptualized as isolated islands, but as a series of sites. This implies that A, there is more than one site, and B, that there is an interconnection among these sites, but Hopkins' work is specific to only one bookstore. For our purposes, many questions remain. Are there other Pan-African bookstores in the local area, nationally or internationally? If there are more than one, how are they linked, or why are they not linked? What forms of communication exist between the stores? Hopkins' work fails to provide insight to these questions. Much of this could have been answered if Hopkins had asked his interviewee for more informants who were members of Black bookstores in the past or presently. Snowball sampling. Relatedly, while Hopkins mentioned that travelers visited the store, he failed to investigate what effect, if any, international travelers have on the bookstore. Do travelers seek out these bookstores? Indeed, these travelers may serve as the human communication links for stores around the diaspora. Given the rarity of such institutions, we would expect that these stores would be sought out by interested travelers. Moreover, Anderson points to the importance travel has had on the formation of identity, and Clifford suggests that we should view such institutions as international motels of cultural information sought by travelers. Finally, Hopkins performed no direct cross-validation at the stores in terms of witnessing daily activities or interviewing other staff and or customers. In total, while the significance of Hopkins' work is tantamount, given the wealth of activities which occur at such bookstores, we are left with a rather general picture of events. Turning to Kirschenbaum's journalism work, we notice that Hopkins is superseded in terms of some of these issues. Kirschenbaum's work suggests that other subordinated racial, ethnic groups have used bookstores as sites of cultural resistance as well. In his article, he reports that many people from the Persian Iranian community in West Los Angeles frequent the Persian Bookstore, a bookstore about Persian identity. More than just a bookstore, Kirschenbaum reports that as a center for Iranian exiles, this Los Angeles bookstore wholesaler aims to keep a dispersed, embattled culture alive in the United States. Reportedly, the original goals of the owner was to join expatriate Persians together. One of the ways the bookstore attempts to achieve these aims by providing a forum for those voices for the entire Iranian community, regardless of political philosophy. Moreover, the store provides cultural books geared toward Persian children. Kirschenbaum's work advances over Hopkins in two significant areas. First, as opposed to Hopkins, Kirschenbaum inquired about the links the bookstore has to other institutions. The report suggests that the Persian bookstore serves as an axis for the Persian community by 1. locally contracting and supplying other Persian bookstores and various Persian cultural institutions with books, and 2, by establishing international connections between their store and other Persian bookstores in Canada and England. Secondly, by interviewing not just the owner, but the bookstore patrons as well, Kirschenbaum discovered that it is not only the store owner who views the bookstore as political, attempting to keep a battled culture alive. Indeed, the customers and patrons also share this viewpoint, seeing the bookstore as a site in which they can buy or sell works they produce. One Iranian artist sells her work at the bookstore, does so in order for her to help keep my culture alive. However, as with Hopkins, Kirschenbaum, too, relied solely on interviews, failed to cross-validate the data with experiences at other bookstores. Moreover, Kirschenbaum failed to interrogate the responses given during his interviews. For example, how do the day-to-day business demands of the bookstore owners and the patrons who sell goods in this store relate to the cultural, political, philosophical goals of keeping Persian culture alive? Are the two goals complementary, contradictory, or related in some other fashion? These issues are not addressed. While advancing over Hopkins' work in some respects, neither Hopkins or Kirschenbaum's empirical work nor Omni or Winant's theoretical work took into the account the fact that humans and institutions have multiple identities. Work by postmodernists and structural theorists alike suggests that differences along other identity dimensions will necessarily reconstitute the meaning of identity at both macro and micro levels. How do differences in gender affect the bookstore's role in their political struggle? How do notions of differences between the stores affect their resistance process? Joyce's work on Black publishers suggests that within the Black community, issues of gender led to the formation of Black women's publishing houses. While nothing has been written about the presence of Black women's bookstores per se, Eastland's work gives us some insight about the functioning of women's bookstore in general. Stemming from an organizational analysis framework, Eastland performed a 2-year study of a lesbian feminist bookstore coffee house in Salt Lake City, Utah. As such, her work gives us insight into the way in which political ideology interacts with daily business practices in such organizations. Moreover, her theoretical goals centered significantly on how gender, sexuality, and class dimensions orient bookstore activity. Methodologically, her study stands apart from Kirschenbaum's and Hopkins' work in 3 significant areas. First, her goal was to gain access to the members' point of view and to explicate those activities whereby members make their everyday experiences visibly reportable and accountable. She thus felt it essential to study the interactions of the collective, focusing specifically on the communicative acts such as the naturally occurring talk of the bookstore members. Accordingly, she chose participant observation and informal interviews as her primary methodology. The second methodological point is that Eastland's database was very rich and varied. Her primary database was the talk, produced during interactions between the bookstore members and their customers. This talk occurred in 3 primary settings. 1. Structured meetings which occurred in private homes of bookstore members. 2. Social settings in which business talk also occurred. And 3. The business setting, the bookstore coffee house in which business-related talk occurs. Moreover, as with Omni and Winant, she performed textual analysis of the feminist literature which was familiar to her and to the organization members. However, it is important to note that unlike Omni and Winant, Eastland did not limit her notion of text to books alone. My notion of text encompasses more than just talk and action. Thus, I am also using as text the physical space of the business, the text of the organization, signs, newsletters, etc. The final methodological note was that Eastland also examined her own personal experiences and responses to the observations she made as a participant observer. Her experiences were incorporated as data into her analysis. Theoretically, Eastland's research uncovered crucial aspects of bookstore activity. 6 of the findings in Eastland's project are directly relevant for our purposes. 1. The books and other store material comprising the store were feminist or lesbian in orientation. 2. The majority of the clientele were lesbian and feminist women. Non-feminist women and males occasionally patronized the store. 3. The store functioned as an ideological enactment of feminism. A. It provided a means to gain economic power and independence. B. It provided feminist ideological benefits that were evident in the members' daily social interaction. It provided a sense of community, a sense of oneness and belonging for its members. It provided an alternative workspace for feminist women. At times it challenged male hierarchical structure. It provided a laboratory for feminist principles. 4. Sisterhood was a major theme in the bookstore. 5. There was a national network among feminist bookstores linked by publication called the Feminist Bookstore News. 6. Politicalism was a major theme. A. The bookstore is regarded as political and social entities internally by members, the main combatant being those endorsing the male-dominant social system. B. The bookstore was regarded externally as a political site by non-members. As such, the store struggled against the repressive tactics of the mainstream, vice squad inspections, verbal abuse, etc. C. While the business was considered political by the members, the community it served was perceived to be non-political. It is obvious that Eastland's work advances over both Hopkins and Kirschenbaum's in a number of ways. Her findings give support to the notion that politicalism was a theme held internally by store members and suffered repression by hostile members of the external community. Her reports of Feminist Bookstore newsletter also supported the notion of an interconnection existing between sites. From a methodological standpoint, direct observation and cross-validation informants responses, she was able to critically analyze informant responses and thereby enhance the validity of the project. Her observations of daily social interactions gave empirical support for Omni and Winant's notion of marginalized yet empowered sites of resistance. This allowed her to see the contradictions inherent in the bookstore, such as the contradiction between running a business and attempting to remain separatist. Critically speaking, however, a few problems were found in Eastland's work. First, while she speaks of a connection between the bookstores existing via newsletter, Eastland fails to investigate other possible links: travelers, phone communication, having the same lecturer at the shop, etc. Moreover, despite their newsletter links, there was no investigation of what was actually communicated. How do the shops affect each other? Was the newsletter circulated to shop members or just employees? Second, despite her focus on political ideology, she states that she took a pluralist approach. She thus assumed that the operations activities in the store or between the stores were decided in somewhat of a democratic fashion. This approach may have caused her to overlook power-based struggles, splits, factioning, occurring within the stores or between the stores. In terms of black political organizations, we know that there has been a history of factioning, specifically based on ideological differences dealing with the primacy of race, class, and gender. For example, Garvey versus Du Bois. Race seems to be a factor, as Eastland reported that black women did not feel comfortable in the store, which alienated them from the black movement. Other organizational researchers, such as Zald, have used power-centered theories and assumed that power struggle occurred both externally and internal to the organization. Moreover, using this external and internal approach to analyze power may have enabled Eastland to analyze how power links the struggle between bookshops to external ones and vice versa. Summary. Thus reviewed, we can see that the major gap in Omni and Winant's theory, failure to report any sites of resistance, this has been somewhat addressed by Joyce's work on Black publishers and the empirical work on Black bookstores performed by Hopkins, Kirschenbaum, and Eastland. However, while these authors' works document the existence of bookstore sites of resistance, there are at least 4 major gaps still present. 1. While oral history method was justified, neither direct validation methods, participant observation, nor extensive multi-informant interviewing techniques were employed in order to enhance the validity of the study and detailed description of the multidimensional aspects. A. The historical aspect of Black bookstores' struggle. B. The day-to-day bookstore activities. And C. Core texts. D. The national and international inter-bookstore communication links were not undertaken. Indeed, these issues need to be addressed in order to provide a richer, more extensive understanding of the process by which Black bookstores serve as sites of resistance for Black communities. My project will attempt to fill these gaps by describing a more complete picture of Black bookstores, utilizing the reviewed works together with the pre-framework and critical suggestions. These will serve as preliminary guidelines for the present research project and give me an initial theoretical base with which to enter the field. We turn now to specifically describe this orienting framework and then to outline our research procedures used to examine empirical issues raised by this framework.
Katherine Massey Book Club, that will do us for this week. We'll pick it up next Friday, Chapter 2, Problem and Methods of Study, the Orienting Framework and Hypotheses Dimensions. Get into it, and as I said, eventually, Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller will pop up in this text, as well as some of the very bookstores that we heard about in Black-Owned. Anywho, the number 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Okay, let's see. I will see if I want to finish the email that we did not get to finish up from last time. I'll finish up the email, nab our callers, and then I'll get in some of my notes before we wrap it up. Let's see. Email number 2. Number 6, this is all going back to Chapter 1. Joyce suggests that Black cultural organizations were gathering places for... Oh, I got that one already. 7. The final major dimension of Black bookstores would be unification dimension. In terms of numeric presence, I talked about this last time. Reports suggest that more than 300 Black bookstores currently exist across the transatlantic, and he gives the 300 here and very few elsewhere. I was not clear on what the author meant by unification dimension. Now, I hope he will give more information on this as well. I think, because he had talked about this earlier and I had the same notation, I think what he means, I could be wrong, and hopefully he'll give more information as we proceed, but I think he's already talked about how much factionalism and infighting there is amongst people classified as Black. I think what he means is that these bookstores have an opportunity. They can share information, and literally we can kind of get on the same page because he was talking about we could have a better understanding about what it means to be black, Pan-African, all of that, what it means to be white, that sort of thing. But I could be wrong, and more importantly, hopefully he'll give us more detail on this as we read. 8. It is possible that a unitary fund of black knowledge based on these core materials could be established at black bookstores. Given this, it seems plausible that such a common unitary black knowledge could form the basis and thus produce a common unitary definition of black identity held by bookstore staff and core bookstore activists and patrons. I was not clear on what the author meant by unitary fund of black knowledge and unitary definition of black identity. At least the black identity thing, I think that's what he was talking about, the whole black, Pan-African, all of that. Black people have argued about those concepts for a long time. At least I think it means black bookstores could get all the scholars, get all the books together and kind of come to a conclusion about all this, theoretically. And the same thing for, I guess, other aspects of so-called black knowledge. I seriously doubt that there would be a point where you could get that some sort of consensus, even if you could, because it's so many people that have PhDs and other degrees or whatever, and they don't agree. So I think it would be challenging, unlikely to get that sort of, this is the conclusion, this is the unified definition of Negro or whatever. Like, I could be wrong though. 9. Moreover, Anderson points to the importance travel has had on the formation of identity, and Clifford suggests that we should view such institutions as international motels of cultural information sought by travelers. He says, interesting metaphor. I will say the traveling component is important because many black people, like myself, at least grew up, there is a black bookstore in Seattle. But many black people like myself grew up in areas where they were not close to black bookstores. So, you go out of town, you get to go to LA and you could visit an S.O.W.S or some of the other, Drum & Spear or Liberation Bookstore or Pan-African Connection in Dallas. You get an opportunity to go to one of these places. Oh my goodness, I'm going to go. Make sure I tell everybody when I get back home, like, that sort of thing. And even globally, and I guess if those numbers are accurate, my goodness, if you're a black person and you're coming from one of these other locations, wow, you might get an opportunity to go to several black bookstores if you get to stay here long enough. Like, man, talking and travel, even put that up, you have a map up in the bookstore to show all the different places people have come from. That is, we'll have to see if that, is a factor as we chat it up, continue here. Number 10, the Persian Iranian community in West LA frequent the Persian Bookstore, a bookstore about Persian identity, more than just a bookstore. Kirschenbaum reports that as a center for Iranian exiles, this LA bookstore wholesaler aims to keep a dispersed, embattled culture alive in the U.S. Reportedly, the original goal of the owner was to join expatriate Persians together. One of the ways the bookstore attempt to achieve these aims by providing a forum for the voices for the entire Iranian community, regardless of political philosophy. I could find nothing online to suggest that Persian bookstores were terrorized like black bookstores. No evidence of police or FBI surveillance. Absolutely. I'm not surprised about that at all. I was curious in terms of what sort of difficulties that the embattled Persians were experiencing in West LA. Like, yeah, I'm just, what was that experience like? And even if this exact same stores is still there, like, has it, had decades of success in comparison to S.O.W.S? I guess maybe if you don't have the FBI breathing down your neck, you can do a little better. Let's see, 11. Joyce's work on black publishers suggests that within the black community, so-called issues of gender led to the formation of black women's publishing houses. While nothing has been written about the presence of black women's bookstores per se, as such, her work gives us insight into the way in which political ideology interacts with daily business practices in such. Moreover, her theoretical goals centered significantly on how gender sexuality, and class dimensions orient bookstore activity? Is this a subtle way of saying all those black patriarchs drove women to form their own publishing houses? I don't know. I didn't get enough details. That's what they say. This is, kind of one of the peak periods of black male privilege. So I don't know whether the Negroes weren't addressing our issues sufficiently. I don't know. I didn't get enough detail about, what drove all of this. I did find it fascinating, and it comes up just in the way his notes are written, that the writing, it transitioned from the talk about why these black women's publishing houses were created to anti-sexual behavior. That is fascinating and would be in line in a temporal sense of what was happening. You have so-called women's liberation and gay rights movement, sexual liberation. All of that is happening at the same time as Michelle Wallace, Black Macho, myth of the black superwoman, and all the rest of black male privilege, and Leroy, that sort of thing. 12. The majority of the clientele were lesbian and feminist women. Non-feminist women and males occasionally patronized the store. The bookstore was regarded externally as a political site by non-members. As such, the store struggled against the repressive tactics of the mainstream vice squads, inspections, verbal abuse, etc. Race seems to be a factor, as Eastland reported that black women did not feel comfortable in this is the lesbian or the gay store, LGBTQ anti-sex establishment. Black women did not feel comfortable in the store, which alienated them from the black movement. The lesbian and feminist women were classified as white. The reason the black women did not feel comfortable is that the lesbian and feminist racists were practicing racism, white supremacy. That would seem to be the likely, logical explanation. I did think he's talking about an LGBTQ bookstore in Utah, Salt Lake City specifically, which I think had the Winter Olympics not too long ago. I don't know if their experience is comparable or relatable to the Negro bookstore experience. Now, the writer, he just told us that the Persian bookstore, he didn't find any evidence that they experienced all the COINTELPRO and FBI tactics and maybe even weaponization of taxes like what we heard in Black-Owned. He said he didn't find any evidence of that. Man, you're going to have to tell me what sort of vice squad raids were performed against this LGBTQ bookstore in Salt Lake City. What were they doing exactly? The name calling, white people do that all the time. They'll call you a libtard just for blinking. But what sort of repressive tactics were the white lesbians, queers? How were they being brutalized in youth? Like, I would need a lot of details on that. And are they still in existence? That would be the other tale. I don't know if that's like the whole time when I read it, like, man, I do not know if that is comparable to the black bookstore. Like, I don't know if there's a history of white queers being told, if you learn how to read, we'll kill you. I don't know if there's a history of white gays being told, hey, you can't come in the library, little fag. I just don't know if there's evidence of that. You'd have to show me. And as such, I just don't know if that's any hoodles. Let's see. I'll double *61. Folks have thoughts on the second chunk of the reading, and then I'll get in some of my notes as well. For the beginning of the second portion of the reading, we heard Aquarian Bookstore. We heard about them in Char Adams' work, Aquarian Bookstore. Unless my memory is bad, they burned down. Riots, L.A., 1992. The proprietor, remember, unless my memory is bad, he was saying, hey, this is like the Phoenix, and for us, for the rebuild after all of this, some things had to be destroyed, and then have the rebirth and the rise again and all that. And we were like, what? That's I don't. But let's see. Page 20. What is this? 27. Top of 27. He writes, the staff, talking about Aquarian, staff stored and distributed books about black life that challenged information disseminated by mainstream educational institutions. Photographs and posters of African kings, queens, and everyday black people from around the world were displayed in the shop. Black music from around the world was periodically played on the store tape player. Formal discussion, forums, and everyday store interactions allowed intellectuals and community members alike to debate the meaning of their black identity. The store was frequented by people from the Los Angeles community as well as from elsewhere in the U.S. and across the diaspora. That travel, Neely Fuller was hanging out there on a regular basis. He lived across the continent. I do think that's important, and I'm sure, like I said, if the numbers are accurate and there's so few black bookstores in other parts of the world, even if they do have a significant population of black people, man, that probably would be. You put a globe up. Man, anytime you get a black person to come in, where are you from? Somalia? Put it down. Trash. That's what Trump say. Put it down on the thing. You know? And I heard Mr. Fuller say for years he would have black people call him from different parts of the world, and they would want to get his book really expensive to mail. Like, I think it might double, triple the price of the book, especially if you're trying to, like, send it to Africa. But for years, they would talk about, oh, man, so difficult. We don't have, bookstores like this and blah, blah, blah. And that was a part of why I said the omission of Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller was so gargantuan from Char Adams' work, because it wasn't just that, hey, they did lectures at these bookstores all the time. For a long period, black bookstores, that was like the place you had to go to get the ISIS papers, to get the code book. You had to make that trip or find that black bookstore in that region to get that type of material that white people did not want us to have. Many reasons why I thought it was important, and to get that here again. And he said right at the top, staff distributed books, and even I remember Mr. Fugate said that about SO1. He said that you have to have bookstore staff that are willing to put in an order to get Dr. Cambon's The Last Book, willing to put in an order for Renethia Tate's Pieces of a Puzzle, willing to put in an order for Dr. Welsing, willing to put in an order for The Man Knot. You have a whole lot of white people, they're not willing to do that. Let's see. And even the discussions, I think, to have black people talking about racism, white supremacy as a global problem where they're not arguing, cursing, shooting, name calling, that is very important to be modeled, because I don't really see that very often. I don't hear that very often. We're talking, arguing about everything else in the world except the system of white supremacy, and doing so in a serious manner, and the environment, not in a bar, not with reefer smoke, not after we've been arrested and ain't got nothing else to do for the next 25 years. We're doing this in a bookstore. We could go and grab something off the shelf, evidence what we're saying. Beautiful. And white people don't want none of that. Let's see. He was talking about some of the limitations of some of the other people's studies, and he says that they did not employ the snowballing sampling to be able to talk to other people to confirm some of what happens at SO1 Books and even what happens at other bookstores. I thought, man, I've been reading Lane Dorothy Roberts' new book. Her white papa, he did the snowballing technique. Like, boy, you let that white man, you dating a nigger woman? Oh, man, you know any other mixed race couples? Where the names? Where the phone numbers? Where they live at? Got the address? Let's go see them now. He gonna snowball on. I'm gonna get everybody. If you know 15 niggers and they got a white wife, I'm gonna meet all 15 of them today. Snowball. That's a name, right? Let's see. Related to Hopkins mentioned that travelers visited the store. He failed to investigate what effect, if any, international travelers had on the bookstore. Do travelers seek out these bookstores? Indeed, these travelers may serve as the human communication links for stores around the diaspora. That would have to be true. Brother Dr. Paul Thomas, when he was with us, he asked me for a book list. That's about the same thing. He sounds like the type of person, if he got to come to the States, oh man, I'm going to hit one of them Negro bookstores and see what they got. Talk to him as long as, time will allow. And that's what I would expect if those numbers are still true. And there's so few black bookstores once you get outside the U.S., oh man. And like I said, when those people, even domestically, if you're a black person and you live in a region, maybe like a Utah or someplace, and they don't have any black bookstores, you go out to a place where they do have black bookstores. Oh man, I'm trying to get everything, I possibly can. Let's see. And even taking advantage because it's so different now. This was written in 1995. Certainly you can go online and get things. I do know it's lots of black people around the world. Even we've had now decades of Wi-Fi and such. They still find it difficult to get their hands on Mr. Fuller's book. And it is very different where you can go and talk to a black bookstore owner, proprietor directly, and ask them questions. Are there other books? Ask them about racism in general. Ask them about the customers who come in. How many white people come in your store? You can't do any of that with Amazon. Let's see. Yeah, I got to see if they got the lesbian. In fact, it might be interesting to see, do they have multiple lesbian queer bookstores in Salt Lake City, Utah at this point? And it's a bookstore cafe. I bet you it's still in existence. They talk all that they want about Vice Squad raids and everything else. I bet you it's still there. If not one, might be multiple. Have to go and see which one been there the longest. Let's see. I would think even the fact that this is in Salt Lake City, Utah, in my humble opinion, it should, and particularly for a report like this, like Utah is basically like a racially restricted region, the whole state. Like, man, most of the people in Salt Lake City, period, are white. I've heard some black people say, I don't feel comfortable in Utah. Not Carl Malone, but not Mia Love, we miss you. But I've heard some black people say, I don't feel comfortable in Utah, much less in the anti-sex Salt Lake City bookstore in Utah. That's why I said I don't even know if that's comparable to, what we're talking about, black bookstores, but whatever. He said, I thought it was important in terms of the way that this anti-sex bookstore was thought about. The bookstore is regarded as political and social entities internally by members, the main combatant being those endorsing the male-dominated social system. That one, every time when they get on this, we got the male-dominated, patriarchal, they don't put that white in front of that. I know in Utah, you all were not having no Negro male-dominated problems. In Utah? Come on, man. But they do that all the time. They throw that male-dominated, and at minimum, you got to put the white on there. And you got to give me a lot. I'm going to have to maybe get this study because you have to show me, like, what did they do? The Vice Squads, what did they do to the gay bookstore, coffee shop in Salt Lake City? Let's see. In terms of black political organizations, we know that there's been a history of factioning, specifically based on ideological differences dealing with the primacy of race, class, and gender. For example, Garvey and Du Bois. Race seems to be a factor, as Eastland reported that black women did not feel comfortable. Got that part. I guess in terms of black people, we argue that is a part of black culture to be in conflict, and white people are phenomenal. That's why I asked about the publishing house. I don't think black males could get a black males publishing house established without white people. And the same, I think, would be true for black females. I don't think black females could get a black female publishing house established without white people. I mean, they don't want us to read, so how would you get a publishing house? And you're going to have to be talking about some, if we're going to give you this, Leroy, you're going to be talking about Lakeisha. That's going to be the agreement. You're not going to be doing no man knot and switcheroo and talk about no white supremacy. You give you the public, and then you talk about how that no count Lakeisha ain't cool. That type of thing. Like, I just, come on. Directly, indirectly. Let's see. But no, white people know how to get us in conflict with one another. Factioning, as they say. When he talks about some of the core things that he's going to get to in this report, he says the historical aspects of Black Bookstore struggle. White people, in 2 words. White people. Or if you want it in 1 word, racism. And then he says core text. I highlighted that right there. Core text. Black bookstores, and since, he's saying Pan-African and all that, fine. Dr. Welsing traveled outside the states and everything. Those core texts would have to include ISIS papers, code book. Would have to. What else is going to be there? They are in the text, so we'll see how they come up, and we'll see. Maybe he has a list of core books, and then we can compare his core text with the books that are mentioned at the end of Black-Owned. See if there's overlap, differences. We'll see. Anyhoodles, we will pick up next Friday. Did I miss anybody? Make sure folks didn't have commentary before we get ready to wrap things up. Let's see. I assume folks are satisfied. I didn't see any hands. I'll assume folks are good for this week, and we'll pick back up for next Friday for Dr. Beckles, where we'll start to get into the actual meat of his report. The dissertation is available for free. You can nab it if you get confused or cannot find. I can share for folks. And I guess keeping in mind that Dr. Beckles, he did commit suicide at the age of 34. We should definitely keep that in mind as we proceed. And I did look, just that maybe we should keep this in mind as well. Dr. Beckles finished up this here dissertation at UCLA, that is Los Angeles, Southern California. He came and did his teaching, starting his career in teaching, a college professor at Washington State University. As I said, that's in Pullman, that is Eastern Washington. Pullman, the racial demographics, over 70% white, less than 2% black. Washington State, for folks who do the true crime, remember that white fella who stabbed up the four white young college students? Brian Colbert, that's his name. He's a student at Washington State. He went over the state border in Idaho and hacked them up and then tried to sneak back over into Eastern Washington. But he was at Washington State. But if you can imagine being a black male, you studied racism, white supremacy in depth. You were at UCLA in Los Angeles. Now you are in Eastern Washington on the tiptoe border of Idaho in a town with less than 2% black people. I will humbly submit that might have had an impact on his mental health. Just maybe. We'll keep that in mind as we proceed with the work of Dr. Beckles. We'll be back with it next Friday. Let's see. So we'll be here Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Compensatory call-in will be here Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. White guest, Black mental health. And then we'll be here on Monday, a little bit early. Racially ambiguous guest joining us live from Spain. I was confused about this because the scholarship that this person talks about is about racism in Venezuela. I thought they were in South America, and they had to dispel my confusion, letting me know they were in Madrid, Spain. I was like, dude, what? I thought that... Never mind. Let's recalibrate. A little bit earlier, it would have been way easier if they had been in Venezuela, much closer time zone, less of a time difference. But that be that as it may, we'll be here early Monday. Finally get our chance to discuss white supremacy racism in Venezuela. Mr. Maduro and all of that. And even, since we have had guests on before from Spain, even, hey, wait a minute, is racism a problem in Spain? Global system? I don't know if they have a lot of black people in Spain specifically, but we'll have to ask about that as well. But that'll be on Monday, a little bit early. I have to go back to look at my time configure. I think it's 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, but I have to double check because it is Spain, so get me with all the times. And that's consecutive days of guests. Sunday, it is normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. But our guest joining us from Australia. And then our guest on Monday, early, joining us from Spain. Global system of white supremacy racism. Any hoodles, much obliged for the folks tuned in. Hopefully worthy of your Friday evening. And we will have so much more to learn as we get into the work of the late Dr. Beckles. Sobriety would be best, especially if you're feeling bummed. The system of white supremacy will get lots of us down. You do not want to turn to old Mad Dog to drown your sorrows. That does not help. We need high-functioning brain computers like Dr. Beckles to help us get this here problem solved. Creator, it has been time. Remind us to stop saying not all white people are racist. Remind us to stop name-calling black people. Minimize conflict with non-white people, victims of white supremacy. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Reading is more important than watching television.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
No problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Even my conditioning has been conditioned.